Let me turn on the game frame. Today's episode was brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the easiest way to create a beautiful website, blog, or online store for you and your ideas. Squarespace features an elegant interface, beautiful templates, and incredible 24/7 customer support. Try Squarespace at squarespace.com and use the offer code TEST at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Squarespace, build it beautiful. On with the show.
Hey, let's start the show.
It's August 20th, 2015. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. I'm Will Smith. I'm back. Everybody's back. The gang's all here. This is the first time in almost a month. Norman Chan, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Jeremy Williams, also here.
All right. Also all right.
Just all right. We had a delicious sushi lunch. We flipped off the order today. We recorded the podcast after lunch. So I think this should be, full of energy, full of vim and vigor in a way that, Wednesday afternoon podcasts sometimes are not.
I ordered gyoza. They brought me tempura.
You could have thrown them into their face. You could have, made
There
a
are
scene.
3 syllables each, both of those.
What's the difference between tempura and gyoza?
Gyoza is a dumpling, tempura is deep fried vegetables.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a
And
dumpling,
sometime it's-
okay.
Yeah, like a fried dumpling. It's all right. Good to have you back.
It's good to be back. You guys I really enjoyed the podcast last week. I listened to it while I was in Virginia, so it was how I kept up with the tech news. So I don't normally get to do because, who the hell can listen to the sound of my voice? It's terrible.
I admire you for listening to the Tested podcast when you're not on it.
I would hope that we got caught up with tech news before we recorded the podcast.
Well, no, I caught up with the tech news by listening to the podcast,
Right?
As opposed to the way that I normally do by making a list of things that we should talk about in terms of tech news before we start the podcast. What you had an adventure this weekend, though, Norm?
After coming back from a road trip, decided to do another road trip, short one this time. Went down to Anaheim, California, Jotunheim, California.
What? Wait, hold on. Wait, what?
It's Anaheim. It just sounds like some Norse
It's
fictional
it doesn't
realm.
sound like a Norse Okay, carry on.
And it was the place of the semi-annual D23 Expo.
Is it biannual or semi-annual?
Biannual, once
it-
every other year? Which one means what?
I'm never sure if biannual means twice a year or every other year. I'll be perfectly honest.
I think they're interchangeable, and that they are
I
both
don't think so.
they're both
I think semi implies that it is an indeterminate number of years in between, while bi says specifically there are 2.
Occurring twice a year is biannual, so I think you were right.
Oh, semi-annual,
Semi-annual.
is every other year.
Annual.
Look, we're learning all sorts of new
There you go.
stuff today.
The semi-annual official convention of Disney and the Disney D23 fan club. Are you guys members?
No.
Oh,
Well, there are a lot of members.
I didn't know that it was a
Semi-annual is twice a year, too.
club thing.
See, I think they're both confusing.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Wait a minute now.
I think they both mean the same thing.
How long has the D23 club been around?
Biennial, Biennial means every 2 years. So
it's
the Ryder
bi-
Cup is biennial.
Annual.
Biannual means twice a year.
Wow.
The solstice is a biannual event.
Holy cow.
Google is learning us all up today.
I don't know how long the actual fan club's been around. The 23 in D23, I believe, stands for 1923, the year of maybe the first Disney cartoon, or one of his first
Is
cartoons.
it the Mortimer one or Steamboat Willie?
I don't know, but it's 1923,
Steamboat Willie is 1928.
so it must be before that.
D23 was introduced on March 10th, 2009, so not that long ago.
Yeah, not that long ago as a club even, but for the club they also host these conventions every other year, biennial, and it's become Disney's Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Are not at Comic-Con. They don't have a big anymore. I mean, they have a booth, but they don't do their big movie reveals and get all the Avengers on stage because Disney now owns Marvel and Star Wars, and they also have their live action slate, all their animated films, the Disney films and the Pixar films, their TV shows, and all that stuff gets now rolled on stage at this conference, which is a large part of why I went down there to check that out. And I know some people down in LA and down in Anaheim and at Disney. So
You like drive. It is well established at this point that you are an aficionado of the drive to LA.
the drive to LA is a perfect drive. A perfect drive is a perfect 5.5 hour to 6 hour drive.
So-
got it down.
One of the things that's funny about living on the West Coast after growing up on the East Coast is that the length of time, the distance that people think of as a short road trip is dramatically larger out here where the country is bigger than it is on the East Coast. Because on the East Coast, a 6 hour road trip is a really, really long road trip. You can go from like DC to New York in 6 hours, which nobody ever does because it's a congested nightmare. Anyway.
So
Is D23 a crowded event?
it's not. The Anaheim Convention Center is a big convention center, and they don't use the entire space.
Wow, really?
But it is so incredibly well organized that it's staffed, I believe, by people who either work at the parks or work for at Disney. But even the expo floor itself is almost organized like a miniature Disneyland. Their entire where you would have an entire giant, I don't know, X thousand square feet of floor space for a booth, they would actually have that roped off and taped off to be a queue. There are like numerous just dedicated queuing sections in the convention floor for exhibits and stores that are popped up on the floor.
Is there any concept of the fast pass?
No, but there is the stage pass. So people wait in line in one of these queues to get to a booth, a massive booth, to get reserved seats for the presentations.
So they have like a Hall H type analog?
They have three different presentations. One of them is like the Hall H analog with 7,500 people, and that's where they did most of their presentations.
So is there like, are there outside exhibitors here? Is there like an EA booth with all the Star Wars games and all the Disney games that are coming up?
Yep. I think they go through an approval process, so not anyone can be there. The exhibitors were split between licensees, so people who make and sell Disney-related collectibles and gear, such as Hallmark or clothing companies.
Like Lego? Is Lego there?
Lego is not there.
Oh.
But there's also other licensees, like EA was there showing off Battlefront, of course.
Okay.
Awesome.
They had the Star Wars Battle Pod there, the video game, the arcade game.
Were you when we talked about this?
The new one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then people could wait in line for that. And then there were a lot of small booths for celebrities who are in Disney films or retailers who their business is collecting and reselling vintage Disney gear and collectibles. So a lot of people go there to trade pins and buy old limited things, statues and posters and stuff like that. But there are also like dedicated big exhibits on the floor by Disney. So they had, for example, this big, huge middle section showing off, here's some products coming up from our licensed products. Here's a sampling of all our Pixar-related, toys, or the Star Wars toys, or here's Lego WALL-E was on display. So this is going to be on sale September 1st, and you can see it in person or get a pre-order there. The WALL-E Builders Club was there, so Mike Senna and Mike McMaster, the guys who made the R2-D2s and made those life-size WALL-Es, had a booth there, and they had their WALL-Es and their Eve, Mike Senna's Eve, on display for photographs. So that was fun.
Was there like a Pixar booth?
There was the dedicated Pixar area, not only with showing the trailer for The Good Dinosaur, but teaser posters for Incredibles 2, Toy Story 4, and Finding Dory. And then they also had concept art from Inside Out, as well as sculpted the maquettes that sculptors at Pixar built up to experiment with their faces and the forms of the characters
Like the
before they were
reference
3D
sculptures.
modeled. Yeah.
Okay.
So that stuff was really cool. For Star Wars and Marvel, they had Ant-Man costume, Guardians of the Galaxy, Escape Pod. They had costumes from The Force Awakens. So I think this was the first time they brought the Clone Trooper, Captain Phasma, out, and
Spoilers.
you got to see that. I mean, if you've seen the trailer, you've seen the Chrome Trooper, beautiful armor on display. The new Stormtroopers and also BB-8 and I believe Rey and Finn's costumes as well.
Was BB-8 rolling around, or was he just static?
Static BB-8.
Did they?
So it wasn't the same BB-8 as at Comic-Con?
I think it was the same BB-8 that was at
Celebration.
Celebration in the display area, but not the one on stage. And those were two
Oh,
different
that's
ones.
what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Did was there other stuff to do besides walking the floor and going to panels? Were there like outside activities and stuff like that?
Nothing outside, but indoors, they had just stuff on display, and I thought there were 3 really cool exhibits that were there. One was like a big 10,000 square foot pop-up museum in the expo hall that was the Walt Disney Archives. So they have a big warehouse in Burbank which stores all these heirlooms of Disney and Disney parks, and this one was the history of Disneyland because it's the 60th anniversary, I believe, of the park.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of the audio animatronics from over the years. The Yeti was just replaced on in the Matterhorn, so they had the old Yeti, the retired Yeti, on display. A lot of the stuff from like the Peter Pan ride, the Alice in Wonderland ride, the Pirates from Pirates of the Caribbean. A lot of those audio animatronics. The very first Disneyland ticket bought by Roy Disney is
Wow.
at 0001.
Wow.
That big a copy of the big concept drawing of Disneyland that was used to sell to investors, and just tons of stuff. Even if you're not like people there are hardcore Disney fans. Like a lot of cosplayers dress up as characters. People like Disney is its own has its own subculture of obsession.
Has for a really long time. Like it
Yes.
was arguably like that and Trek are the 2 first ones.
Oh yeah. So a lot of those people there who are just like lifelong Disney fans that have been going to either their own small conventions or these for a while. But I think there was enough there for people who maybe just have a passing interest in maybe just one of the facets of Disney to also enjoy.
Do you know what it costs to get in?
It was like $50 to get in.
Okay. Did it feel like, so you've been to Comic-Con and Celebration, some of the other stuff, did it feel like they trotted out the same stuff that they brought to Comic-Con, or was it kind of different stuff?
No, I think it was a lot of new stuff.
Okay.
And I mean, having that whole Disneyland Archives exhibit was unique. And like that would have been worth $15 price of admission.
Like if that was at Lockmer or something.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
would've
If that
gone to
was in a MoMA style exhibit, it would have been just as valuable there. And then they had, on the Pixar side, they also had John Lasseter's shirt collection.
I thought that was really funny.
His Hawaiians?
His Hawaiians. He has over 1,000 Hawaiian shirts.
They have
And-
they have official shirts made for each film.
That's what it is. The John Lasseter Studio Collection that he has made custom for each film, and they had them all on display in a row.
Well, they do sell them. They sell
And
them,
they
at,
sell
the, at the
yes.
Pixar store.
Yes, and then some of them are exclusive for certain events.
Right.
So he's really big on the Hawaiian shirts. I think there's a video if you search on YouTube of him like showing some reporter his wardrobe, and he's like, "Oh, I go through like a rotation of 300 something
cool.
shirts every year."
So he wears one shirt a day and then just
I don't know.
This is the June 28th shirt?
He certainly could.
That would be amazing.
John Lasseter certainly could.
So did they make a big deal out of the new Pixar film announcements? As far as I know, there wasn't an official announcement until D23 of The Incredibles 2.
Yeah, I didn't get to go into any of the big presentation panels, and the first day, I believe it was maybe this Friday of the convention, was all their animation stuff. So John Lasseter did all the stuff introducing, Zootopia, which is the upcoming Disney film.
Yeah.
There's one with The Rock, I believe, that's coming out, and then the Pixar slate. They brought out all the directors, for Good Dinosaur, Incredibles, and they brought out the new writing team for Toy Story 4.
Have they announced a director for Toy? It's John Lasseter, isn't it?
I presume it's John Lasseter.
Yeah, I think that was announced.
Yeah, but new writing team for sure, because Rashida Jones is working on that. I don't think they showed any footage or anything from that though.
Did they talk about Muppet stuff?
No, that's a really good point. I didn't follow the TV stuff at all, but is the Muppets even under their purview?
Yeah, they bought Henson Company right before Jim Henson died, or right as Jim Henson was ill.
I believe they had that same booth set up that the Muppets had at Comic-Con, which was the soundstage, the ABC soundstage.
Okay.
And that was there, but I didn't really get a chance to walk by it. So maybe, presumably
So
that was there.
I mean,
on the
because they have
TV
two things, right?
track.
The TV show starts this fall, and then they also have. Well, I mean, this isn't really a Disney thing, but there's a new Henson documentary. It's part of the In Their Own Words series on PBS that's coming out later this year. That they released a trailer for that looked I saw the trailer this morning. It looked really, really good. So fun time at D23. It sounds
Fun
like.
time. They also had a big teaser for Shanghai Disneyland, which we know some people who are actually working as Imagineers there. That stuff is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's really fascinating how they are adapting
Like the Western
Disneyland.
experience
I mean,
into
I-
a Chinese
it's-
experience.
Well, there was already a Hong Kong Disneyland.
Okay, but Hong Kong is a little different, right?
I mean, Hong Kong, from if you talk to Disneyland, I think they believe that it was misplanned to be too small, and this one is a big full size Disneyland equivalent. It's not the Disney Paris where it was too big at that time, but just outside of the stuff they show, I mean, obviously big hotels. There's like a Toy Story style hotel, and they have a Tron ride because Disney has Tron.
Did they talk about Tron?
No,
They
no,
canceled
nothing
that,
about- They did
was the
cancel
rumor,
Tron.
right?
Yeah. I read that, like, just the culture of what people do to attend, what people would do at parks, and who attends parks, and how people behave at parks in a different part of the world is completely different. Like here, if you go to Disneyland, it's mostly kids and the adults accompanying them. In China, because of the one-child policy, and because their research, the anticipation is that it's a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 adults per child.
That sounds great.
And the queuing system has to be completely redesigned because people cut lines all the time, and there's
Wait.
strategies that people use to cut lines, like using children to run in front of the line and then catching up to the child and sneaking in where the child
wow.
is.
And that's a good
one.
idea.
Yeah. So they have to, like, kind of socially engineer their rides in the queuing system
Yeah.
to fit the culture of what people expect and keep people entertained and amused.
Well, the technology that they have at their disposal for doing that now is much stronger than they've ever had.
Right, with the
before.
wristbands.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you could potentially get marked as you enter the queue, and that's it.
And then obviously Star Wars, the big thing. Harrison Ford was their big surprise guest at the very end. They did have the
cool.
cast from The Force Awakens.
How'd he look?
From the video I saw,
Yeah.
he looked fine. Everyone there really was really gracious, and because it was a Disney centric event, everyone was talking about what big Disney fans they were and talking about how happy they were to be part of this Disney family. They gave everyone a Drew Struzan poster.
Who?
Drew Struzan, who's the painter who did who has now done posters for all the Star Wars films and Indiana Jones films. If you've seen the 80s poster, like Back to the Future,
Oh, like the watercolory painted ones.
that's all Drew Struzan.
Okay.
And this, I don't think, is an official Force Awakens theatrical poster, but I want to say that it is. It's an official poster for the film, but for D23 for this event.
The one with Harrison in the corner.
Yes, and it has the new the villain,
The new stars
antagonist.
up top, yeah.
And it has one of the stars with the lightsaber, which I don't think we've seen before. But they also announced 2 new Star Wars lands at Disneyland.
Wait,
Disney
what?
World.
You mean like instead of Tomorrowland, they're finally getting rid of Fantasyland and they're putting in Tatooine.
I don't think they're ever going to get rid of Fantasyland. But there will be a Star Wars land at Disneyland and Disney World, taking up 14 acres
Yeah.
Wow.
each, which is big. They also just bought 15 acres of space off-site, and they're moving, I think, administrative and maybe where they keep their animals or something.
Oh, like a lot of those trailers
there.
and stuff?
And the rumor is that they're getting rid of Toontown in Disneyland and putting a Star Wars land there.
Oh.
Wow.
Building 2 dedicated attraction rides, big rides there, including a Millennium Falcon,
Wow.
and all sorts
So this is a big initiative in the vein of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter.
And that's really, I think, some Disney fans I've talked to had some critique about this. They think that Star Wars fits really well into a
Tomorrowland.
Tomorrowland, where Tomorrowland itself is a theme, but not necessarily a brand.
That's where the Star Wars ride is now.
Yes, yes. But when you theme an entire dedicated area, as opposed to it being Fantasyland, Frontierland, Tomorrowland, but when you call it Star Wars Land, just like there is a Cars Land in California Adventure, then it's too focused and it kind of takes away from some of that magic.
My
But it really
understanding-
is the Harry Potter.
Yeah, my understanding is that the Harry Potter thing was a little bit weak when it initially opened because it had a really limited number of rides and like Diagon Alley wasn't open and stuff like that. And then as they've continued to expand it, it's become
Huge
a
success.
destination in and of itself.
And it overwhelms the entire park. People
Yeah.
don't go to Orlando to say the Universal Studios to go. Let's go to Universal Studios and see where Nickelodeon stuff is filmed. They go, let's go to Harry Potter Land.
Well, and it used to be that Universal Studios was a kind of expensive ticket, which was essentially good for like a slightly souped up Six Flags experience. So there were a couple of good roller coasters, and there was like a Batman and a Hulk roller coaster and stuff like that. And then the rest of it was kind of like normal theme park. So now, like I'm excited.
I'm excited.
I'm
I mean-
excited about Star Wars Park.
yeah, and I think it's going to make those parks even more crowded.
Yeah, totally. Especially, there's a lot of people who are now exploring California Adventure because maybe they haven't been to it yet or they haven't seen the Cars land yet. But this is going to bring everyone back over to Disneyland side.
Well, I mean, people buy the theme, the pass
The
that gives
park
you
hopper?
the park
So
hopper.
expensive.
I'm going to go tell you a
so
secret, Norm.
expensive.
Disneyland is a thing that is designed to extract money from you as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and did you hear about Banksy opening his own fake Disneyland?
Is that really a
Possibly
Banksy?
happening this week.
Do we know that that's actually a?
I
we
don't. No one knows if it's actually Banksy. In the UK, construction has been going on for what looks like a fake Disneyland, a satirical version of Disneyland, with a few rides and a castle, and people are attributing it to Banksy. I
Yes.
mean, it's a massive project and supposed to be opening this week.
There we go.
There will be a cantina at the Star Wars Disneyland.
I don't think so. You know
Yes,
why?
no, I
because
heard there
Disneyland
would
does
be.
not have a liquor license.
Disney
You
World
can
does.
and California Adventure does too, but Disneyland itself.
Let me tell you a
does
secret.
Not have.
If they wanted to get a liquor license, I'd say they probably could.
I read there was going to be a cantina.
So maybe just a cantina, like a fun. Like maybe
They
that's
sell you
their,
blue milk.
That's the
Yeah.
equivalent of the pizza place, the Rocket Pizza ship.
Atomic
place.
Pizza?
Yeah, at Disneyland right now. It's a diner
Yeah.
as opposed. to
They have a
being
Pizza
bar.
Planet?
It's not a Pizza Planet.
Oh.
It's just the pizza place in Tomorrowland right now. So there goes your Disney updates. And Rogue One photo came out.
That looks really good. I want
Yep.
to see more of that.
Yeah,
If
that
you
looks
look,
awesome.
Look closely at the gloves that the lead character, I forget her name, from Theory of Everything, Felicity Jones. She's wearing. They're very similar to the Boba Fett gloves.
Is they announced what the next anthology is?
They're not calling it the anthologies anymore.
Well, now they're just calling them
them
Star Wars movies,
a
right?
Star Wars story.
Okay, so did they announce what the next anthology
No.
is? Okay.
But they did announce that Colin Trevorrow, who did Jurassic World, will be directing Episode 9.
So is Ryan Johnson still? Because originally they kind of said, "Hey, he's doing 8 and 9."
They never really said what
Okay.
he's doing, but he's writing and directing Episode 8. Is now the official.
Oh, so
stance.
Lawrence Kasdan's not writing episode 8?
I'm
I don't
sure
think
he's.
so.
I'm sure he's participating.
No, I don't know.
We talked about the Sun Still Entitled this week, but just in case you don't listen to Still Entitled, I went to the Udvar Hazy expansion for the Air and Space Museum at Dulles Airport in DC while I was there visiting family. And if you have the opportunity to go there, you should absolutely go. It is a $15 admission to pay for parking, basically, and that's it. It is an astounding museum. And Norm and I went and saw the Enterprise when it was on the deck at the Intrepid Air and Space Museum in New York. And it's a breathtaking. I mean, the Enterprise is breathtaking. Seeing the Discovery, which flew dozens and dozens of times, and the kind of battle damage that entails it's an amazing. It is literally breathtaking. I mean, my wife went in the room. She's like, I can't even look at it. It's you're overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it's not like it's hanging; it's on the floor.
It
and
is-
You can walk
yeah.
practically right up to it.
You can see it from all sides.
Yeah.
I was a little bummed that they don't have those. They have these. I guess they do have the catwalks on one side. The thing that I love about that museum is that they have these catwalks through the whole thing, so you can see the tops of the airplanes that you normally can't get a good look at.
Yeah.
And they don't really. They have a medium height one, but not one of the high height ones. It's astounding. It's gorgeous. If you're in the area, you should definitely go check it out. IDF is happening this week. The Intel Developer Forum. A couple of things. We talked about 3D Crosspoint memory a few weeks ago when you were gone, Norm. Basically, Micron and Intel have partnered, and they've developed a new kind of non-volatile memory that's slower than RAM, but about 1,000 times faster than NAND flash, which means that the data stays when the power is off, and it is extremely, extremely fast, even compared to SSDs. They didn't announce any applications when they announced that the technology exists, but it seems like the first thing will actually be some SSDs that will probably follow the normal SSD rollout, where they roll them out for data center models first, and then later, 6 months to a year later, they'll be like a high-end prosumer consumer versions, as they did with like the 750 SSD series that are PCI Express native and all that stuff.
So we should expect them to be expensive at first?
You should expect them to be extremely expensive. So the cost will be per gigabyte between that of RAM and NAND flash SSD. So don't expect a 1 terabyte SSD for $500. I would expect it to be double or more, at least at first. But I mean, that's interesting that they have this and it's coming and there's practical applications early on, because usually when you hear about some kind of new technology that's that far out, it takes a few years before you see anything. The other thing is we got more Skylake details. Reading what Gordon Mong over at PC World wrote, it seems like this is another more mobile-oriented CPU with the power savings more than performance gains. But obviously, when you have power savings on laptops, then you get performance gains because you can use more CPU and less battery at the same time, and people tune the machines a little differently. It is going to be an incremental jump, more like not like the Ivy Bridge to Haswell jump is specifically what I said. And then there's a bunch of other chipset and security features and stuff that come out as well. Google launched a new router. So, by the way, sorry about the confusion 2 weeks ago, I guess, when we talked about Skylake. I don't know if you guys talked about it last week.
We did.
A little bit.
I wasn't sure if we were under embargo when we were talking about that, and somebody asked about it, and it was because you usually handle the Intel embargoes on CPU stuff, and anyway, there was confusion on the show. Google announced a new router, which is kind of a surprise.
Yeah, today.
Yeah,
Was it just today? It was yesterday.
2 days ago.
2 days
If
ago.
you're listening to this
Yeah.
on Thursday.
So it's called the OnHub. It's a smart. They call it a smart router. It can prioritize connections for multiple users. It has an app-based setup. And the interesting thing to me is that it's $200 router. They're going right at the high end of the expensive consumer routers. So we should explain a little bit how routers work because how wireless works, because I think a lot of people probably don't know this. Usually when you buy a router, you go and you look at it and you're like, okay, I'm going to buy the newest spec and the cheapest price in that spec.
Newest wireless spec.
Like so right now it's AC.
Right.
Do you want N? Do you want G? Do you want AC? You buy AC, but all AC routers and all N routers aren't created equal. Because of the way those technologies work, you can add more antennas and get more throughput, or alternately have more kind of fallback abilities for, say, so that, for example, if somebody comes to your house and plugs in with a G device that's now probably 10 years old, it doesn't bring your whole network speed down to G speeds. It just brings one node down, and you drop a little bit of capacity, but not the entire network to 54 megabits from 800 or 1000 or 1900. So this router has 12 antennas or 13 antennas, 6 for 2 gigahertz, 6 for 5 gigahertz. And then one that detects, I assume, congestion. They call it a congestion antenna. They don't specify what that does. But it basically is presumably to see, okay, here are the channels that we should be on. Here's the spectrum that's going to be good right now, and switch intelligently between that stuff. It sounds interesting. I think it's really interesting that Google's getting into this business.
I don't think so. I mean, it seems really logical. $200 is
Explain
still
why
a
it
lot.
seems logical.
It's because this is, if you look at the design of this and all the promo videos and photos that they've released for this, it is something that they want people to put in their, not in the closet, but in the living room. That's why they've designed the antenna system to be ring-based and not bunny ear-based. And that's why there are very few buttons on it, even though there is, USB and one Ethernet, presumably just connect to your modem. It has a speaker on it too.
So is this just an access point, or is it a router as well?
No, it's a router. It's a router. But I don't think this is, for the way it's designed, I think it falls short for two reasons. Performance-wise, it could be great because we're talking about 3x3 for 2.4 gigahertz as well as 5 gigahertz. So it could have really good broadcasts. And their explanation of why they want you to put in the open, on the kitchen counter, for example, is that you're going to get the max. And when it's not stuck in a closet, you get the maximum range and the best kind of access to this. And their app stuff, I'm sure, is going to be great, much easier to use than typing in 192.168.1.1 on a web browser. But you're still going to need to connect it to a modem. And it has a speaker, I believe, because they want this eventually to be at the home of some type of connected service. It's their stepping stone into the Amazon Echo business.
I also assume that they looked at the connectivity problems people have with stuff like Chromecast and things like that, and this is a response to like janky either provider provided wireless access points and routers, or just cheap, the $79 AC router that has one antenna and is essentially no better than an old N or G router in some cases.
I think for the people sitting at this table, it's less likely going to be like this product's going to replace the router in your closet, and more like it's a $200 access point. You would buy this probably. If I was to look at this, I would want it to have more features than it just being an access point. If it had a microphone built in it, and this is how it can access Google Now,
that would be amazing.
That would be amazing, and that's an instant step up. But there's no microphone capability whatsoever, so I presume it's going to be in their app. And I think that it's still just going to be something if you're going to put it in your counter, you're going to use this in addition to another router or another switch.
Why not?
Because
use
there's no wired Ethernet out
because there's no wired.
No, but you can hook it up to there's one WAN port, one LAN port.
So okay,
so then you can hook it up to a switch.
Hook it up to a switch.
Right, but then that's not going to be in your living room.
That also is true.
Like if they want this to be in a centralized location,
are you going to run an Ethernet cable to your living room?
No.
So,
but this sits on your desk.
I think fundamentally the design of this is they don't know. I don't think it's very clear what they want to do with this.
I mean, this seems like a good router for a mom.
Yeah,
for my parents. I shouldn't say mom, but for people who aren't technically inclined.
I think that's their
like
pitch
if you are a tablet, phone, laptop household, and then some streaming boxes, this is perfect.
Okay, so you still need a modem.
Yeah.
Whether you're using DSL or cable, the modem still has to sit, presumably in some disclosed location. Some.
But this can sit right next to it on your desk, because most people have their modem coming into their computer room, wherever their computer lives, right?
And most people who have modems in their computer room have the router sitting there anyway.
Right.
But I think Amazon wants this to be in a more centralized location, or Google wants this to be in a more centralized location.
I mean, to me, I bet that my understanding is that the consumer satisfaction surveys on routers is incredibly low. This is from talking to people who made that Eero, the Kickstarter or Indiegogo from last year or earlier this year.
Is that because of performance or because of
because
interface?
It's a pain in the ass.
So interface.
They're always a pain in the ass. They stop working for unpredictable reasons. The software is usually janky. It has all the problems of, say, a microwave oven in terms of terrible UI UX design, and then also the problems of networking stuff being incomprehensible to people who don't already understand how networking works, which is literally everyone except for network engineers. I think that this is a direct approach to that, and I think that probably the reason they're selling this. The reason they made this is because of Google Fiber customers. Because my guess is that they provide a node for Google Fiber. You have a bunch of Ethernet ports that come off of that, and then you plug this into one, and this is your wireless path. So that way you don't have to upgrade the expensive fiber endpoint every year, and you only upgrade the wireless when the new specs come out.
That seems like a small pool of customers to design it for.
If they're selling it to those people, everybody else is going to want it too because it's Google.
I do wonder why they made it. I mean, it's like if it did have some sort of Alexa capability, then that would make a little more sense.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't have that. It has an interesting LED array in the same way that it seems like it can point in directions using light somehow. It's a 6 tricolor array. But what I'm curious about is, I thought that the advertisement was pretty good.
I haven't watched the video.
Did you watch that?
God, it's so as seen on TV. Like, oh, my internet doesn't work.
Right, but
it's true. It is something that resonates.
Everybody can
relate to that.
Can relate to that. It has a baby watching. The first shot is a baby watching a video, and then it freezes up, and the baby stops laughing and looks up at the camera and says, "Huh?" It's perfect.
And I'm sure that they looked at both what's happening with Drop. First off, which part of the alphabet is this under? Is this under the Nest?
No, I think it's Google.
This is just Google. I mean, they have a ton of data about how shitty people's wireless connections are, because they can even look at YouTube analytics and see, oh, right, people that are on wireless connections on this size screen are probably on one of 25 different the 25 most popular laptops. And then they can see when their bad YouTube experience is because of somebody's shitty access point.
The problem is undeniable. It's more a question of whether the design, what they're pitching here, is the right solution for it.
Well, it's not going to help bad internet connections. And part of the sales pitch is that it will fix all of that.
So having run a router, a DWRT router that I can get real data out of, most of the time you have a bad internet connection, it's not because the internet connection is bad.
Yeah?
Yeah. Like my Comcast, in the last 2 years since I switched to DWRT, has gone down very little, and only very occasionally do we get like significant sags in performance.
Wireless coverage, like the physical coverage,
Yeah.
the antenna design, that's something that they're trying to fix by putting this in a centralized location.
Yeah.
That remains to be seen after testing.
Right.
Software, hopefully they got the software down, simplified it, and can alleviate some of those problems.
Well, they make a big deal out of you connect to it through an app, not over
Right.
Right. And it uses
web browser.
Bluetooth Smart Sense and all that stuff to
So,
enable that.
Presumably that's something they can figure out as well. But what they're pitching, I think it falls short of something that can really make this an essential piece. Like, why would I actually want to get this if I have a router I'm happy with, is that kind of Alexa Echo replacement. Get one step ahead of Apple, which doesn't have something like that, but we presume maybe in the future has something like that.
I think those are two separate products, though, because most, like Jeremy said, most people don't have their cable modem or DSL modem at a place in the house that would be useful to have.
But that's what they're pitching.
Google Now.
They're pitching this to be in that place.
I don't
to
think they
be.
are.
No, they're just saying you can put it someplace where it doesn't. You don't have to.
I think you're saying that because it's good looking.
Yeah.
No,
And
but
they-
look at that photo
and
right there.
They put
and the video
and
and
they
the
put
photos.
it out in the open.
Yeah.
But they're saying it's a beautiful device. I don't think that they're saying necessarily that you should have it in your kitchen.
Right. I don't think they're saying. I think they're just saying, hey, look, this doesn't look like something that was designed by 14-year-olds.
And the design being a good design, physically, aesthetically, and judging by that is very much in the kitchen.
But you're
is what
making
they're
a big
pitching.
logical leap. Like you're going and saying, hey, this looks like this other thing, and it has a light on the top, and you should put it someplace where you can see it, and then saying, oh, this is the way.
I'm
we're
not
gonna
saying
get.
it. Google's saying it with their photos.
But no, you are inferring from photos of a thing in a staged setup that this is going to be a voice entry point. I think that is an enormous logical leap.
It's absolutely not a voice entry point because there's no microphone on it.
Well, you don't know that. They could be one of them that's just not turned on.
It says in their specs,
Oh, okay.
no microphone. They have a speaker, a 30-watt speaker on the top. And I'm saying that what they're pitching in their video and their photos is that this is in a public space. And I'm saying that, great, and if that helps with the reception and the wireless coverage, then that's a fine use for a router.
Yeah.
But then I'm also saying that then there's a missed opportunity here for them to use it as an Amazon Echo competitor.
So the thing that I found, because I moved, my cable comes into the garage, and then I have a router out there with a big giant switch, and then wires to all the rooms in the house. But the problem is the garage is off on the side of the house, and that meant that in my kids' room and in the bathroom and in other places on the far side of the kitchen, there was no Wi-Fi. So a few years ago, I bought an expensive ass, when I was ready to upgrade from N to AC, I bought a big ass AC router and just plugged it into the wall behind my computer in my office, which is in the central part of the house. All of a sudden, I have perfect wireless over the entire house and massive speeds and the whole thing. Like fundamentally, moving your access point, your wireless access point to the middle of your house, probably is the easiest way to get better wireless. If they were talking about things like the ability to add multiple versions of these and have them connect seamlessly between them, which is a kind of inexplicably difficult thing to get working, even for people that are presumably good at networking like we are.
Like a corporate solution made simple for homes.
Right. Like the kind of thing that you can move between nodes and it just reconnects seamlessly. Your video playback doesn't stop. Your FaceTime call doesn't drop, whatever. That would be great. That's what the Eero people were promising earlier this year.
Google is promising that kind of automatic QoS stuff where it'll try to detect who's watching video and dedicate more bandwidth to that traffic.
And as a longtime person who's played multiplayer games on the internet, when I hear things like, yeah, we're going to automatically detect that and bring that, I can just see the new video game coming out and saying, yeah, you need to open these ports, and then me going to the app and it's saying, we don't have, how do you open ports?
Right.
Right. It's the same thing that concerned me about the Eero. This is a lot of the same promise that the Eero is. The thing that the Eero does is they have multiple radios in each box, so you can set up a mesh network that will seamlessly hand off. Like they're actually saying, hey, look, we'll solve the problem that everybody has where you have a dead spot in your house.
Yeah.
Because you just put another access point in between us, plug it in the wall. They're like $99 each, and it will cover your dead zone.
That'd be great. Sell
Right.
Sell me $200 excellent router with ports I can put in the closet, and then a bunch of $50 to $100 things I can put in dead spaces and corners.
Yeah.
To get full, not only wireless coverage but voice coverage.
I'm intrigued. I tried to buy one, couldn't buy one.
Yeah, they
Would
sold
you
out
use
really
this
fast.
based on its specs as your dedicated router, as your only router?
Oh well, I would test it out first. Yeah, I mean, I'm moving to a new house in a couple months, and we're gonna need a powerful router. I was planning to get like a commercial grade thing for that's a couple $100 on Amazon, which this is the same price. I could probably just get away with this if it works well enough.
So the thing that they've done here that's really interesting is they put a ton of antennas in this, and it's dual band, which means that it's literally competing with what would be a $250 or $300 D-Link or Netgear router.
It is a relatively expensive product
It's-
for most people.
Yeah.
Who are just
They would be
doing the
very high end.
finding latest spec, lowest price.
And if you compare it to like what Apple does with their time capsules and airports and all that stuff, it is a dramatically more capable than at least the last time I looked at the stealth upgrade of those Wi-Fi access points. Having more antennas gives you a ton of flexibility, and if the software, like if they make good software for this, it could be a real phenomenal device. So I don't know, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that they're not segmenting, because the thing that makes me crazy is the segmentation of the traditional router vendors, where they say, okay, this is an AC router, it's only $80, and then it has 2 antennas
Oh,
and no 5 gigahertz,
is
and
supposed
it's a
to be
piece of garbage.
one high-end product to fit all.
We
all
we
needs.
didn't mention that it was a collaboration with TP-Link.
Yeah.
Who's
TP-Link's
TP-Link?
The router makers who make the hardware.
And they're the current highest ranking router on the Wirecutter. So
Interesting.
I guess they make good routers.
Which chipsets do they use to say?
Don't know.
Yeah, but those have bunny ears.
Yeah.
They do have bunny ears. I think we should we should do a quick ad read and then have the VR Minute.
So this week's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Squarespace. And Squarespace, of course, you guys know, is a service to build websites. Building a website can be tough, even if you know your way around coding or creating something that looks good and works well. It's a time-consuming affair.
Did you know that I built a website once, Norm?
You did. What did you build?
I really early on in the early days of the internet, I built a website with Front Page that was going to be a direct competitor to those old Quake blogs. Do you remember Blues News, Shack News, Redwood Unstomped, all that? I basically went out and I was like, okay, it's 3 columns. There's some stuff on the left, there's some stuff on the right, and then there's a blog roll in the middle. We didn't know it was a blog roll back then. It took me weeks to make it. And then by the time I'd finished, I just wanted nothing to do with it again and moved on.
And then hosting and getting
Yeah.
everything set
Just
up.
getting
So
a domain set up, that stuff's all really hard.
all of that is bundled into Squarespace service. They have templates, they have 24/7 customer support, and it's only starts at $8 a month. You also get a free domain if you sign up for a year, and it's no credit card required, I believe, to start a free trial.
Yeah, you can start a free trial right now. There's no commitment. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TEST to get 10% off of your first purchase. Again, use the offer code TEST and get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace. Build it. Beautiful. And we're back. Hold on. It's time for the VR Minute. Oop, that's still going. I got too much music here. Too much power.
Bring it.
There we go.
Nice.
I like that Hank really slowed that down when he made that theme for us. Woohoo!
So what's new in VR, Norm?
So this week we actually went to try a new VR demo in San Francisco, hot off the heels of SIGGRAPH, which I believe was maybe 2 weeks ago. This is one of the finalists for in the SIGGRAPH competition for VR. It's called Real Virtuality, and it's a Swiss-based company Artanim. They are Artanim.
Like art animation.
Right, but
Okay.
condensed. And they're a motion capture company, but also experimenting in VR. And what they've done is take hardware technologies from third parties. For example, they're using, for their HMD, just a DK2 right now. And then for their motion tracking, they're using cameras and an optical tracking system from Vicon, I believe is the name of the company, Vicon. They're just doing the software and building these experiences.
So the motion tracking stuff they're using, unlike the Constellation or Lighthouse that Oculus and Valve are using respectively, is it's the stuff that you saw like Andy Serkis wearing when he was playing, Gollum or any number of other characters. In that there's it's like the leotard with the ping pong ball suit. But instead of having a leotard, you just put on a thing that goes over your hands and a thing that goes over your feet. And then there's also ping pong balls on the outside of the DK2 and the backpack that you wear in some other places.
Reflective IR, and it's way more akin to Constellation, which is Oculus' solution, than the laser-based Lighthouse system that Valve has developed. So they had in this demonstration where they brought it to a big room at the Swiss Next facility in San Francisco. I would say maybe a 20 by 20 foot room. They had at least a dozen cameras set up at the top of the room.
No, it wasn't. It was only 6.
It was many
Really?
more than that. Yep. Set up at regular intervals, not only on the edges but also along the middle, and then allowed you to wear these markers. And the markers are reflective IR, but they're like the performance capture stuff. It was ping pong balls, and they were tracking 4 points for each position, so 4 balls needed per camera for each position. And like you said, attachments on your hands, one on each hand, and also on one on each foot around your shoes, and then also a series of trackers on the Oculus HMD.
And there were some on the backpacks too, weren't there?
Yes, there are also some of the backpacks. So the backpack is interesting to keep it wireless. The whole thing, unlike the Valve system where you're walking around and there's a big tether, and even the Oculus system where there's a tether but not as big as space, it was all wireless. Now that also introduces a little bit of latency, but all the rendering is done locally. So you're in the backpack is just like a BC with discrete GPU.
So the latency came from converting, like passing coordinates to another machine to interpret them.
Yes, and I think this was less a demonstration of how responsive their VR solution is, because the latency was definitely noticeable if you could wave your hand around your face.
I didn't find it objectionable.
It was not nauseating,
Right.
but noticeable.
It was way better than, say, the other VR, the non-Oculus, non-Valve VR prototypes we've seen, or non-Morpheus.
Control
also.
VR, I think, was still a little more responsive than this. Anyway,
Maybe.
regardless,
Okay.
it was less about the latency and the tracking, which they don't do the hardware for, and more about what type of software they had made for it.
Like
what type of demos.
experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're doing this, I believe, to sell this to museums and possibly theme parks and get investors, putting this into some type of real world educational or entertainment use. And they had some demos to kind of illustrate those purposes.
So what did you experience?
So the first demo was a museum exhibit. It was a tomb of a pharaoh. And one thing to note is that both Will and I were using it at the same time. It was a multiplayer experience, which like when we did the Oculus Touch demo at E3, it was a remote multiplayer experience where 2 people could interact with each other in different physical locations, but not and interact in a connected virtual space. Here, it was one physical location. So that brought some interesting things to the feeling of presence, in that the moving object, Will being another moving object in that virtual space, enhanced my feeling of presence, because he was another reference point.
So
it was another thing being tracked.
How large was the real world space you could move around?
It was about
20 by 20 probably?
About 20 by 20.
It's big. It was bigger than the Valve room for sure.
Yes. So not only were we getting at least 5 points of tracking per person, and that modeled with inverse kinematics to a virtual model, an avatar, but also other real-world objects were mapped into the game, essentially. So,
how so?
For this tomb, they rolled in a sarcophagus, which was in the real world just a big cardboard box with markers, and they put it on a predetermined place on the floor.
Actually, the sarcophagus didn't have markers.
Sarcophagus had no markers, but it was a predetermined place on the floor. So they knew in their simulation, at this corner of the room, there's supposed to be a sarcophagus. And so that we could, when we went up to it, we could touch it. And then they also had objects that were marked, like a stick that was marked, that was used as a torch. And also
that's cool.
a small a chest that was marked that we could pick up and bring up close to our eyes. The torch was super cool because it offered some type of illumination, so we could actually hold it, wave it, and illuminate parts of the room, illuminate other objects, and illuminate parts of the sarcophagus to interact with it, essentially, without needing to physically touch that object. Now, the other thing that's cool was that the room that we demoed it in had a pillar in the middle of it that was just part of the architecture of that room. It wasn't when these people in Switzerland and Geneva made the demo, they didn't know that was going to be the room.
Yeah.
They got there and they were like, "There's a big ass pole in the middle of this room. We got to
Yes.
figure out what to do," and they just jammed it into the virtual
That's
spaces.
right. So they could configure their cameras and also just integrate a physical object and texture map
space.
it into the space,
Yeah.
which in itself then added to the feeling of immersion because it was yet another point of reference that we could use to actually touch or walk around and to give a more feeling of presence.
So sorry, I have a sick kid at home, but the thing that is important to note when we were using physical objects, I don't think you and I did this very much, but when you were talking and I was in the background with somebody else, we kept passing stuff back and forth. Like Norm and I were able to throw the torch to each other and catch it, and it didn't have quite the fidelity. I mean, it's hard to say because it's been a long time since I used the Vive now. I feel like it didn't have quite the fidelity of, say, the Vive controllers when they hand them out to you and you just reach out and grab them and they're there. But it was very close to it.
It wasn't the fidelity in the sense that we need to manipulate things on that object.
Right.
Like we need to press buttons. But the torch itself was, you think of it as a light toy baseball bat. When Will tossed it to me, I was able to grab that, from 3 feet away, 4 feet away.
And like you caught it just like you would a real torch. I mean, there was a little bit of additional latency, but when Norm says there was latency, he's talking about like seeing latency moving your hands back in front of your face. I feel like that was much more the DK2 and the fact that we haven't used DK2 very much lately than the motion tracking stuff having latency. The place that it got really interesting was when you could like pick things up and look at them. You could use the torch to manipulate the lighting in the game in the Tomb demo, which is super, super cool and interesting and something you don't really get a chance to do in most video games. So
the interactivity,
yeah.
their demo of interactivity in a virtual space where it's more than just looking around, but also, and this is something Vive could do as well, but we haven't seen. When we were drawing things in Vive and blowing up balloons, it felt like that, but because there was another person in that space that you could interact with and physically interact with, high five with. There were collaborative things and experiences that we just hadn't seen. And that's not to say this is going to be the best that has to offer, but it was just something, a new perspective.
I looked at this as more of a taste of the future than a thing that we'll actually see in the real world.
Yeah. The second demo was demonstrated a use of that 20 by 20 space in a way to simulate different spatial configurations. So it was a maze and with very narrow walls. So they positioned both of us at the start of the maze because they had markers for that on the floor, and then loaded up the map, and we could walk through the maze and avoid obstacles, step over barriers, see lava on the floor, holes, spikes, look through virtual windows, and because of that map design and seeing it in a 1-to-1. It really, really gave a good illusion of a space, even for spaces that weren't actually there.
Even though you couldn't touch the walls.
Yes,
You just avoid them naturally.
yeah, and holes in the floor was the bigger thing. Like
Yeah.
they had, like a jumping puzzle basically, where a physical jumping puzzle where they had pillars and you're supposed to jump from point to point. And in the real world, you could have just walked across it, but the illusion was so compelling, and your brain wants to play along so much. That even if you had half your foot over a pillar, you would feel like you're going to fall over.
Like
You wanted to
your
keep it
toe
there.
literally feels like it's not on anything.
And they
like
were
you lift
saying-
your toes up as if you were standing heels on the pillar.
Right.
Which is bizarre.
And they're saying in their research, even the slightest even the slightest drop in elevation. So, for example, if they had put pads on the floor and cut out a 1 centimeter drop in that padding where those holes were supposed to be in that map, your brain would be exponentially more convinced that there was a giant hole there.
Just getting your toe to feel the edge would have
Yeah.
been enough to do it.
Exactly. So your brain does so much of that work.
Now, say I got to do that a couple of times because I was doing it in the background while you were recording. The thing I will say is that the moment that you start cheating, the moment that you step on the whole thing evaporates. All the artifice goes away. So you have to, like, if you don't play along, then it's no longer, like, your brain realizes and the illusion is broken. Basically.
And it's one of those things that, for people who have genuine fear of heights or something, it could be troubling for them, and they'll need to be walked through
Or therapeutic.
or therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or troubling and therapeutic.
Probably.
But the design of it being a constrained maze space. So when Will and I were in that space and we couldn't see beyond the corridor or around the corner, but we knew that the real environment was only 20 by 20, you lose sight of where the boundaries of that real world is because you're going in circles. And
Hold on, did you not know which way was the front door when you took the headset off at the end of the maze?
I knew for the heads because of that pillar, the wooden pillar.
Oh, right.
In the room give me a bearing. But when you're walking around, for example, around one corner, and then they give you a fake window, a ledge to look over, and you see an expanse, that then feels like that expanse is actually beyond the physical wall space of that 20 by 20 room. They use space constraints to help expand the space as well as just remap the space in an interesting way.
The thing that they didn't do that I really missed was they didn't have any equivalent of the chaperone system that Valve has on the Steam VR stuff. So there was no, once you started getting outside of the range of the cameras or lost enough cameras that they could no longer track you well, it just kind of started getting really janky. And I think that having a gentle prod to kind of push you back in the right direction, with the chaperone stuff, it comes up in the form of like a blue mesh wall that looks almost holodecky. That I think that's a really important component for this.
I thought you meant the godlike
voice.
Valve dev that comes in over your headphones.
No. Hey, you're going to hit the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not that. That would be nice.
Yeah, the holodeck walls. So because this is a mocap company, a performance capture company, I think that gave them some information to tune their inverse kinematics. So it does break, not difficultly. But I think they from capturing, presumably hundreds of different people doing different things, they know that when people move their wrists, their elbows are likely to move in, and when people move their legs up, their knees are how people's knees bend up and down.
You like if you turn your palms up, I'm holding my hands out in front of me flat. When you turn them up, usually there's one motion. Within inverse kinematics, it kind of works through the potential movements of your joints. I think it has specific trouble with like your rotator on your shoulder.
Yeah,
because it's a weird joint. It's not like the ball and socket on your hip.
The wrist is a perfect example because they know where your head is from the HMD tracking, and they
know where your torso is.
They
as
know
well.
and where your torso is, and presumably how tall you are. So they know for people on average, if their hands are a certain amount of distance out from their bodies, and they turn their wrists, then they're most likely, most of the time, turning their elbows in a certain way, as opposed to when their wrists are further out extended, then their elbows aren't moving that way. And so that's how they fill in that illusion.
IK is an interesting puzzle, but do you guys think it would have been any less immersing if they didn't use it? If they just
I think you could have just had hands and feet, and it would have been fine.
It's been Rayman.
I think the IK helped so much.
You did like it.
I really liked it. I liked that there was a physical avatar that I saw, and it wasn't just floating head, hands, and feet.
What were you? Were you people?
We were people.
With Uncanny Valley faces?
Uncanny Valley faces, yeah.
That's right.
The other thing that's worth mentioning is that like you can fix a lot of the IK problems, especially with arms. Like I think the legs were fine, and you spend so little time looking at your legs that janky IK is no problem. But there's no reason they couldn't have put like a vambrace on or something like that gives them one more data point for your upper arm or shoulders or something like
occlusion.
that. Maybe. Anyway, it was a really neat demo. It was right up there with Birdly in terms of experiences that are novel and use VR and give me something that I've never experienced before.
And if you're in San Francisco and listening to this before the end of the week, before the 21st, it's a free demo at Swissnex, SWISSNEX, downtown by the Transamerica building.
They have a website.
You can go there from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. just this week, though, before those guys go back to Switzerland and try the demo out yourself.
There you go. One more thing in the VR Minute. Andy Rubin invested $15 million in Cast AR. This is Jerry Ellsworth's company. She was one of the first prototypes we saw of any kind of augmented reality. And I think this is super good news for both Cast AR and AR in general. So
There's one other thing here. It's AndroidPolice.com reported that YouTube has recently added a VR flag inside of its SDK.
Oh, so that you can flag video captured from like an Oculus headset or something like that?
Potentially. Google has not announced anything yet, but I imagine it might be something that they're going to roll out with their, what was that?
Like 360 video.
The 360 thing
Yeah.
that they're doing.
So the Andy Rubin thing is good news for Cast AR, but you got to take it also a little bit grain of salt. They said that, Cast AR I think has only 11 employees right now. $15 million sounds like a lot, but it's also not a ton of money.
Figure 10 grand a month per person for the employees, and then figure out. You know how long that money lasts.
I don't think. When Oculus says that the Facebook money just allows them to scale up, I don't think like 15 million is going to allow Cast AR to scale that much more.
No,
but
that's like a seed. That's like seed money essentially. It's, hey, this is a neat idea. Go figure this out
Yes.
more, and then we'll get more money for you if it pans out.
And what they were trying to figure out is how to turn it into a end-to-end consumer product, or not necessarily a computer accessory, but something you could buy in a box and lay out, unroll your reflective tape or reflective mat, and then play AR board games on.
Did they need this Cast Infusion to fulfill the Kickstarter?
I don't know if they needed to fulfill the Kickstarter. I would hope not. But I think that fulfilling the Kickstarter isn't enough to turn this idea into something that's going to be viable.
Right. The Kickstarter was a really neat demo. It is not something. The stuff that she was showing when the Kickstarter was running was really neat and promising, but like isn't a product. There needs to be more stuff there.
And for people who don't know what Cast AR is, augmented reality, but using the real world and using this giant this reflective
Transflective, right?
Transflective mat technology. So the idea is that you're projecting, you're wearing these glasses that project using Pico projectors an image onto this special surface material, kind of the same reflective material as stoplights and stop signs and reflect and bicycle gear.
Like if you shine a flashlight at a license plate from really far away, it lights up because it reflects all of the light that comes at it back in the direction that it comes from.
Exactly back in the direction. Right. So the light's coming out from these projectors from your glasses, hitting the surface, and then going back exactly to your eyes.
And the projectors are directly above your eye, like as close as you can get them above your eye is possible.
So you get a stereoscopic 3D image, but multiple people can wear these glasses and look at one shared virtual environment. So if you imagine rolling out a 3 foot by 3 foot virtual board game, then multiple people can use tools, interact with characters in the board game. But what I think they need is figure out some type of content that they can tap into with this, and not just build it as SDK for people to make original content.
This is always the problem, right? Is when you have new hardware that does something that nobody's ever seen before. How do you get software to be there ready when the hardware is ready?
Video.
And Oculus spent 2 years figuring it out.
Yeah.
Well, and Oculus had at least other analogs to work from. They could put first-person shooters in VR.
Right.
These guys, this is a brand new platform.
Yeah.
There is no existing virtual board game that can just drop into this.
Generic.
Well, that was their demo.
Yeah, HoloChess. Anything else in the VR Minute? Should we wrap that up?
Yeah.
There's some Android news.
Yeah, Google finally confirmed Android 6.0 is codename Marshmallow.
What other Malomar was another possibility?
Milk Dud?
No, you can't put Dud in the name of your product.
Milk Chocolate?
Too generic.
Well, Marshmallow.
Malted milk balls?
Why don't they just go straight for s'more?
Well, because it doesn't start with M.
M.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Okay. Anything else?
So with this, it's going to be released in the fall. The near final SDK is out for developers, and there are leaked pictures, rumors that the next Nexus phone will be made by LG. Will be a variant of the LG G4. Will be this year's Nexus phone. But if you can't wait for a Nexus phone, Samsung also did announce their Galaxy Note 5. They changed the design, even though it does have the stylus. It now has no replaceable battery and no replaceable micro SD card.
So all the same stuff as the 6 then.
Yes, it just looks like a bigger 6 with the stylus. And this presumably, I guess is kind of related to VR Mini, is going to be the hardware that the quote-unquote first consumer-ready Gear VR will be made for.
So is there concern in the Samsung camp that like they made these choices for the Galaxy S6 and then it's underperformed? Are they concerned that this is going to impact the Note 5 as well?
I don't think there are concerns among the Samsung fans, probably.
Yeah.
But I bet the design for the Note 5 and the 6 Edge Plus were already in place well before.
Well, I mean, yeah, that those wheels were in motion. Did they talk about resolution on the screen?
It's the same, 2560 by 1440.
What about the keyboard?
There's also a hardware keyboard that they're selling as an accessory that you can clamp down the bottom of the screen if you want to get that BlackBerry experience. Not for me.
Oh, like it's like a sleeve?
It is a sleeve.
Oh, that's dumb. Project Air is delayed.
Project Aura, this was Google's
This is
part of
modular
the
phone.
ATAP project,
Yeah.
that modular phone project that they were going to, I believe, I want to say Puerto Rico was where, I'm getting my outside U.S. countries mixed up and cities mixed up. Whoa. What was that?
There we go. Project R is delayed.
Project Aura. Modular phones, you're not going to get them in the U.S. anytime soon. 2016 looking less and less likely.
Oh.
Sorry, modular phone fans. What's this about a first RTM Windows 10 Insider build?
Post RTM. RTM's out. So
Yeah.
Insider program is what Windows, Microsoft has been using. They use it for Windows 10 as a way to beta test Windows 10, and it's continuing. So the first post Windows 10 release is out.
So who is this for?
It's for insiders.
But I mean,
That's exactly.
well, if you're an insider, is this if you had a pirated copy and you don't want to pay for it?
No.
Because insiders don't have to pay, right?
It's less about not having to pay as much as insiders are the people that Microsoft trusts to give feedback. And they said so much about the Insider program leading up to the release of Windows 10, about the Insider program being valuable in pushing Windows 10 in the right and wrong directions, or the right directions in their eyes. They're continuing with it. So because Windows 10 is going to be a continually released thing, maybe with once a year giant, or once every 2 years giant updates. But
They
we're
said multiple
seeing-
times a year.
Well, this is one of the multiple times in
Okay.
terms of small updates, but this is the first part of that. So you get Insider first,
Okay.
then the consumer. So it's just like Chrome. It's just like early release.
So you're not talking about like an ISO download. You're talking about the fast channel got an update.
This is the fast channel.
Got
Yes.
it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So-
I thought you were talking about like you could, if you were an insider, you could go download an ISO and install it. Okay.
No.
I understand now.
Fast channel. So, but it gives you an idea that Microsoft, less than a month after the release of Windows 10, already moving along with their fast channel stuff with some aesthetic changes, some memory management changes.
Got it.
So
I mean, there are some pretty substantial outstanding bugs in Windows 10 as it is now, like relating to Samba shares and stuff like that. If you have a NAS on your network,
That's
or
a big
whatever.
deal.
and
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's incompatibility with Linux stuff, not incompatibility with Windows stuff. So Microsoft doesn't care, but it is an issue.
And speaking of bugs, just because there are new features or some minor changes in the Insider track doesn't mean you should jump into it immediately because there are bugs that go along with those.
It seems like there's 2 tracks on the Insider program, fast and slow. If you want to get the updates, it seems like the slow one is a good option, especially if you have a relatively common, either like a laptop that's going to be a common laptop, like a Surface or a Dell or something like that, or if you have a relatively common hardware in your desktop PC.
Are either of you running Windows 10 on your Oculus box?
I am, and the Oculus stuff is not working
Still
on
not
Windows.
working.
I haven't tried it since I got back, but I spent a few days before I left trying out different Oculus demos. I ended up just booting back to my Windows 8 partition because I upgraded drives at the same time I upgraded OSs, so I had a clone of the Windows 8 install.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. You're not running it? You're running Windows 8 still?
No, I'm running Windows 10, but I haven't loaded up Oculus since I got
Okay.
back.
There is some more Oculus SDK stuff that we didn't talk about, but basically there's a new direct mode, and it seems like the extended mode is going away for people who are TK2 users. which is ultimately a really good thing for everyone involved, I think. What's this about Xbox One streaming? I tried that the other day and was pleasantly surprised by how it worked. On a wired connection, it was almost indistinguishable from using just the plugged in directly to the Xbox.
I don't know how many people are using it, but it seems from our reports, the experience has been good. If you are the type of person who wants to dedicate your Xbox to streaming to another PC, and so your TV's freed up in your living room, in the August update for Xbox, now there's 1080p 60 FPS as a quality setting.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, I would much rather go the other way, because I'm much more likely to want to play a PC game on the big ass TV in my living room than to play an Xbox game on the little monitor in my office. But I mean, I think they said that they're working on that.
They haven't
now.
said they're working on it. They've said they've thought about it, and I mean, it's got to come.
I think they said while you were gone, hey, we're aware that people want this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why bother with Steam Link coming out in 2 months, 3 months?
I mean, I don't think they want to make things easier for Valve. Could be wrong.
It's over. As far as I think writing's on the wall. The PC space is owned by Valve.
Well, agreed. There's an iPad Pro rumor. You guys talked about the supersized iPad a little bit last week, I think. Did you have sizes? 12.9 inch?
We talked about 12.9 being, I think, a good size for people who want to use iPads as their primary computers.
You're talking about or as a writing, as a paper replacement for drawing and stuff like that, assuming the digitizer is good enough.
Yes, and the digitizer, and we also questioned whether, Force Touch was going to be big enough of an update to make this next iPhone or iPad, the big S update. But the stylus is where the Force Touch could be actually used.
Yeah, so the rumor is that there will be a Force Touch stylus that you can buy as an accessory for the iPad Pro.
I don't know if that works the way people think it works.
I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Digitizer and Force Touch are completely different things.
I think the idea is that then you'd be able to have bumps on the paper that you're drawing, but I don't know why you would want that.
No, Force Touch is different than...
Oh, the hard press.
Force Touch is hard press.
What's the bump?
The bump is...
The Magic Trackpad?
No, they're calling... You mean on your watch?
Yeah.
What's
it's on the trackpad on this laptop,
Taptic.
too.
Taptic feedback.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think taptic feedback is going to be on an iPad across the entire thing.
Force Touch could just be their marker that says, hey, it's pressure sensitive.
Right. Force Touch could, it could be just be...
A generic term now.
Exactly.
Like Retina has become.
Yes.
Why would they stop at the Pro if they're going to support a stylus? Why not roll that out with all new iPads?
I think after using styluses on the iPad Mini and to the iPad Air, both of those are too small.
You think the regular iPad's too small?
With the current digitizer, it's too small. Like if you had a really fine, high precision digitizer like you find on a Wacom tablet or something like that, it's a different story maybe.
I would think that that's what they would do.
I would hope so, but my bet is that they're not going to put a really expensive digitizer in the lower end. I think that's going to be the differentiator if they actually do make this 12-inch iPad, 13-inch iPad.
I mean, and then we're talking about this is the tablet that people wanted before the original iPad was released at the amazing $500 price point.
Yeah.
I use that with air quotes.
You did not actually. They're figurative air quotes. Did you guys read the Amazon New York Times story about we've heard that Amazon is a terrible place to work if you work in the delivery centers, but now apparently it's also a terrible place to work if you work in the corporate offices, corporate headquarters.
I care about the people who work everywhere.
Yes.
But I didn't read that article.
Okay.
I read Jeff Bezos' response to it.
So the article basically said it's a corporate culture that is... step back and take a little context. When companies reach a certain size, it seems like there are always these stories. There were stories about Microsoft in the 90s. There were stories about Microsoft in the early 90s. There were stories about Google. There were stories about Facebook. There were stories about Apple, EA, all of... once you reach a certain size and have 20,000 employees, there's enough disgruntled employees to generate this kind of story anywhere. Not to say that the things alleged in the New York Times story are not true, didn't happen, but you have to take even a relatively large number of stories. I think they said that this was 100 different people were interviewed for this New York Times piece. But you know that Amazon employs, 25,000 people today in all their different businesses. So getting 100 people who are pissed off enough at Amazon to talk to the New York Times on the record probably isn't that hard. That said, the story basically said, look, Bezos has created a culture where everyone is hyper competitive. There's a lot of room for backstabbing and the kind of politicking that generally is regarded as toxic most places I've worked. Where the ranking systems for employees and the stack ranking equivalent that they use at Amazon creates a situation where managers have to fight for the people that they want to keep, and those may or may not be the best people. And then also that it's a culture where when you receive an email at midnight, if you don't respond to it fast enough, then you get a text that says, "Hey, why didn't you respond to my email? I sent it to you 6 minutes ago." Along with a bunch of, there was a litany of things. You should read the article if you're interested in Amazon and how it works. I felt like we probably had to mention it. I don't know that.
Yeah,
it's going to change the way I do things with regard to Amazon.
Right, like you changed the way you dealt with Uber.
I changed the way I dealt with Uber.
Yeah, you did do that.
I briefly.
Oh.
And then I got tired of fist bumping people in lifts. You know what? It boiled down to the fact that when you hit the button on Uber, it was always like 2 minutes, and with Lyft, it was always 6.
And if there was any problem with Amazon, I think it's less about the employees that are being profiled in this piece, and more about the infrastructure that sustains the low cost shipping, massive inventory.
Well, that's the meta. That's the large scale problem, right? Is that we've gone from shipping everything in 18-wheelers to shipping everything in FedEx vans, delivering things in FedEx vans.
I felt like, did you read Jeff's reply? I did. It was, he's trying to put out a fire. It was very defensive. It was, this is not the Amazon that I recognize. I hope it's not the Amazon anyone that I know here recognizes. If it is, I want you to email me directly. I mean, it seemed...
Then I'll have you murdered.
And serve you to my breakfast octopus.
I could imagine a world in which he really is just completely oblivious to any unhappiness in his company.
I mean, you remember the stories about pitching, going into one of the things that was specifically listed that was shocking to me is, hey, we have these meetings, these weekly or monthly meetings where you're expected to memorize data on 50 or 60 page reports in some cases, and if you don't immediately know the number when you're asked in the review, then you're castigated, which is the kind of the Silicon Valley stories about going to pitch something to Bill Gates or going to a meeting with Bill where you had to talk about your project and not knowing the answer being a Microsoft fatal endeavor. I mean, probably are true, right? Like that's not a bad. It is not difficult to imagine that those companies are the way they are because they demand a high level of engagement and a high level of knowledge and a high level of expertise from the people at the high levels of their company. It's easy to paint that kind of obsession with a brush that makes it seem toxic instead of constructive. I mean, we've all worked at places where you can't criticize the direction the company's going because it's the president of the companies, and if you say something bad, then he'll torpedo you, or it'll end up working its way down the chain. So I think as with anything, it's more nuanced than probably either the good or the bad.
I just wanted to hear Jeff say, we'll do everything we can to eradicate this. I will look into this. This is not something that's
but if this is what makes Amazon good,
well,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's a company culture he started, and regardless of how it began, when companies grow, there's a lot of layers in between, and maybe he just needs to reset his vision for how his company's run.
Speaking of Amazon Flex is a new thing.
Yeah, I saw this, and I guess I mentioned this. It was It's not something that they've officially announced, but it is being piloted in Seattle. It's an Amazon, you can come pick it up service.
Oh, they have this in Manhattan now too, right?
Not that I've read of.
Oh, I thought there was a place that you can go pick up your stuff in like Midtown.
Well, they do Amazon Locker, which is different,
right?
Where they like disseminate it and they put your package in a box somewhere.
Amazon Locker, by the way, if you need returns,
handy,
great, cheaper than UPS usually.
Okay.
If it's a return, you have to pay for.
Yeah. I thought this was interesting. I mean, there's a lot of times when I imagine that it's free. Like, first of all, no shipping costs. So you got, basically you can wait 2 days or go pick it up today. There's a number of times if I lived close enough to a shipping warehouse that I would love to go pick it up. So I think that's kind of cool. Obviously, it doesn't apply to everybody, but it's Amazon Flex.
Twitter changed DM rules sometime without me ever realizing this. What happened, Norm?
Last week, and they said they would be doing this for a long time, but finally was enabled last week, and also on the mobile versions and the desktop site. For DMs, you can actually go beyond 140 characters now, and
what?
that makes DMs something that is almost completely useless and something that's maybe a viable alternative to, to email.
But you still can only DM people that you both follow, right?
And I think there's a
No. You can turn it on a per account basis, so that
can.
if you want to be open to everyone, you can.
You can be DM'd
I
by.
see.
Yeah.
But I think that obviously it's a move toward DMs being an important part of the Twitter ecosystem, where it is an IM alternative.
I mean, I in a lot of ways I love DMs. I follow like 800 or 900 people on Twitter, and it's a really nice way to communicate with people who I have a pre-existing relationship with, right? Because there's no, I don't worry that they're going to get bit bucketed by the spam filter or something like that if I've never emailed them before, and I know they're going to see it, and it's immediate, and they respond, and it's somewhere in between, in terms of priority and accessibility, it lives somewhere between, say, a text message, which you have to have my phone number to do, or an email, which anyone who has access to tested.com can find on the website. So I like DMs. I think they're good. Gearbox owns Duke Nukem forever.
Finally.
Forever. What happened? Was the
Three-year
lawsuit
realms,
settled, or
yes,
did they just give up?
Lawsuit is settled, and Gearbox, hopefully they'll use this as a way to make the Duke Nukem Forever, or Duke Nukem, in the modern Duke Nukem game that we all were waiting for.
Do you think?
Were we all waiting for it? I don't know.
No. Is Duke salvageable? Duke is a product of a.
Yes,
of a,
Duke is salvageable.
of a
Duke is like
time
Star
gone
Wars.
Past.
Duke is
No,
like
Duke is
Star
not
Wars.
like Star Wars.
Yes, it
It's
is,
not
dude.
exactly a $4 billion franchise.
No. But
Duke
I'm
is
saying,
like it's like Evil Dead 3.
Well, Evil Dead's coming back.
Really?
Yeah, TV show Ash versus Evil Dead. Time for
Bruce
everything.
Campbell involved with this?
Yes, he's a star.
He's Ash?
Yes.
Or is he Ash's dad?
No, he's Ash.
Wow.
He's got the chainsaw and
How
everything.
did I miss this?
Duke Nukem 3D is so quintessential to the PC experience, at least mine growing up, that there's nothing that's going to, I will always forgive Duke Nukem Forever for taking forever and all this.
And being terrible.
And all the silly games that they've had other minor Duke Nukem games come out and other platforms since then. I will always take notice of a major AAA Duke Nukem release.
Doom is coming back and bringing back, the heart of what Doom is supposed to be, and maybe very different from what people are expecting these days with your Halos and your Call of Duties. But there's definitely a market for people to play that type of game.
Yeah.
And
Man,
Duke
I just
could be modernized.
I just don't think that I mean, basically, if you look at Duke Nukem as Rowdy Roddy Piper's character from They Live, which is what he is, I don't know that is a character I'm interested in playing anymore.
Well, maybe from a satirical standpoint, just like in Saints Row.
Do you think Gearbox has the ability to do satire?
Yes, they have great writers.
It does have to be satirical. It has to
Yes.
be humorous.
That was the problem with Forever.
There-
Was
No,
there was
no,
no
no.
satire.
The problem with Forever was it was a game designed well before and well past its time. I think that it can be self-aware and it can have fun gameplay, and they could do very inventive things with it, especially with Gearbox experience with Borderlands, and they're not afraid to start and stop projects.
But Borderlands is referential humor. It's not satire. Like there's a little bit of satire in there, but it's mostly, hey, here's this thing that and here's a funny riff on it.
If you put the analogy to movies, maybe there probably is no place for the 80s action movie in today's world, but there maybe is a place for something like Kung Fury or
That's true.
some other, or
Shadow Warrior.
I'm saying in terms of the movie analogy.
I know.
But there's a place to do a fun riff on that culture and that era of entertainment in the video game format.
Here.
I don't know. Did you guys read the thing about Pixels that somebody wrote that said basically if they had made Pixels instead of about old arcade games, they'd made it about Minecraft and Candy Crush, they would have made millions of dollars because kids would have gone to see it instead of not going to see it?
Oh, if it had been like PG.
No. If
Or
it had been
G.
a Minecraft game, not a Pac-Man game.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But they would have had to make it lower rating. Yeah.
Yeah, PG, whatever.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I mean,
I think this fits in that same category. I think the market for people who have affinity for games of the era of Duke Nukem is very, very small.
well, people paying $60 for a video game are not the same people necessarily.
Right.
It's not the same
That's
market.
true. HBO owns Sesame Street.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this last week. Did we?
How did you not talk about this?
It came out on Thursday, and we recorded the podcast on Wednesday.
Well, that would do it. I think this is actually pretty good. I don't see a downside here. So the story is basically that HBO has a 5-year exclusive for new episodes of Sesame Street. The exclusive does not last 5 years. It means that they get a 9-month head start on new episodes. The upshot for Sesame Street is that they are now able to produce many more episodes a year, almost double than they were previously, because they've been cutting down the number of episodes that they produce each year. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of upside. This is, as the Sesame Street, the Children's Television Workshop guy said, basically that this is the kind of public-private partnership that is really good for traditional public TV. And I think that having more Sesame Street in the world is not a bad thing.
Daytime HBO, more than just movie licensing deals.
Hey, HBO used to do the Fraggles, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
They got dope hooks with Muppets.
seriously, they go deep with Jim Henson, and that was a great series. I bought that on DVD
I've
years
never
later.
watched it. I should probably go back to it now.
That's good stuff. My kid still has to watch it.
How old? What age?
It's on Netflix.
Should I start with like 5-year-old?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know the song down Fraggle Rock.
Bump bump.
The thing that's interesting to me about this more than anything else is it started me thinking about why Netflix and Amazon and HBO are going after children's programming.
Yes.
And as a person who has a kid that's just starting to watch TV, I can see a place where if I was strapped for cash, I would say, okay, I'm going to turn on HBO for the month the Game of Thrones comes out, or the 2 months the Game of Thrones comes out, or for, let's say, 2 months a year, and then I'll watch True Detective and Game of Thrones and all the stuff that's come out since the last time it was on, and save $200 a year on HBO or more even. With children's programming, you don't have that option, because my daughter now expects that there is infinite Curious George and infinite Daniel Tiger anywhere she goes at all time.
Yeah.
And
Netflix has proved this market.
yeah, Netflix and Amazon are in the bleeding trenches for this market right now, because like you get new Daniel Tiger on Amazon but not on Netflix, and you get new Curious George on Netflix but not Amazon, and it's a bloodbath out there. So you end up paying $100 a year.
I
for
would
Prime.
love to see the metrics on that for Netflix. I don't use Amazon. I have Prime, but we just don't watch it for some reason. But
They have a really well-developed kids section. It's better than their adult program.
Netflix has designed their UI so that the family stuff is at the top. And you can log in as a kid now. You can set up a kid account, and that's all that they see.
I really like that. Although sometimes some unexpected stuff pops up in that kid section.
Yeah, they don't. You can't control the age limit, I don't think, of what they can see. It's all like the kids section is universal.
Amazon, if you're using Amazon devices especially, gives you really granular control over that. So you can say, oh, my kid can see this but can't see Curious George or whatever.
What client do you use to view that?
I'm using a Roku, I think. So I don't. That was available on the Fire TV, I think, but it's not on the Roku. And the Roku is. I like the Roku because you have voice search and it works across more stuff than it does on the Amazon service.
It's supposed to be a new Apple TV coming out this year.
It's the word on the street for the last 2 years.
But if they do have an app store for it, then we'll see an Amazon. We'll see Amazon Prime Viewer on there. We'll probably see everything else.
Isn't there Amazon Instant Video on the Apple TV?
I don't think so.
I kind of thought that there was, but I've gotten to the point where I use the Xbox for everything but Apple TV stuff.
Yeah.
Like AirPlay and iTunes specifically. The new Plex app for iOS, speaking of iOS stuff, is delightful.
We talked about that last week. And this is my first experience with it, because I upgraded to iOS 9 and then installed Plex on my NAS box. And the old version didn't work. New one works. I'm super happy with it.
It is a really, the player now has full parity with everything that they allow, including new support for sync, which I don't know if you've used that yet.
What is that?
So sync if you're a Plex Pass subscriber, which means you pay a certain number of dollars a month or like $200 lifetime, then you get a handful of extra features that don't come with Flex by default, including the ability to copy videos and transcode them over to a device. So, for example, when we go on a plane trip, we load 10 or 12 movies up on an iPad, and it becomes my daughter's airplane soother.
Yeah.
And she can, which is delightful. And it'll pull everything from your ripped DVD collection for that. The sync stuff used to be really buggy and take a really long time, and the new version is crazy fast. And if you get something partially downloaded but not all the way, it'll still work. It
can
just stops when
multiply
you finish the partial.
Can you choose what level of transcode you want?
Yes, you
That's
can. I generally recommend medium because it seems pretty good for iPad screens. The highest is basically a straight transcode just to the right H.264 level and all that, and they can be really big. The thing that I've been trying, that I tried with that I hadn't turned on before, is camera roll syncing. And what that does is lets you upload photos from your iPhone or iPad or Android phone, or I think even Windows phones, camera roll to the server, to the photo share on the server, and you control what that is. So basically it gives you like a local version of iCloud photo syncing that works, because iCloud photo syncing is an enormous piece of shit in my experience.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is free, and then you can back up the file share using, CrashPlan or Dropbox or whatever you want.
Does the
so that's
interface
cool.
on the client let you stream down the photos that are stored in the camera roll?
So
if it's an easy way to get your photos onto your TV.
it's a super easy. You can do slideshows and the whole thing. It's a little bit difficult to actually curate them once they're on there. But for example, I can go to recently added. I can go to photos. Sorry, I'm still not entirely sure of the new app. The only thing that's a bummer is it doesn't do videos from the camera roll, at least not that I've seen yet. So this is like the first 300 that's synced up. I haven't hit the button again, but here's pictures from a friend of my kid's birthday party, and you can see they come in relatively fast. It's of course limited by the upstream at your house if you're going over the internet, but you can swipe from picture to picture. And it's pretty good, and you can see it. The new Xbox app I think supports photos. The new you can AirPlay the photos up using the Apple TV, stuff like that, and the support on photos on the different clients is pretty varied. So older clients are less supported than newer clients. There's a Megabots Kickstarter. We saw these guys at Maker Faire, and they do they're building giant death robots. They originally were building giant death robots to have like mechanized paintball fights, but then they were challenged by a team of robot builders in Japan.
Nope.
No?
They challenged.
Oh, they
robot-
challenged?
Its whole thing is
It's
kind
a-
of shady. I
okay.
mean, obviously, from what we saw of the Megabots, I mean, when you say America's giant fighting robot versus Japan's giant fighting robot, it sounds really cool. But when we saw Megabots at Maker Faire, yes, building this giant machine is cool, but this is not Pacific Rim.
No,
These are
no, no.
Very,
These
very
are
slow robots that can fire paintballs. Custom-made
vertical
paintballs,
tanks, not
basically.
yeah.
And to raise money to build out the rest of this robot, they made this challenge and put it out to another big robot builder in Japan to do a brawl. The brawl, I'm going to tell you right now, the brawl is not going to be awesome. Not going to be awesome at all.
Well, so the thing about the brawl is that the Japanese team said we want to do melee fighting, not paintball. So they're having to redesign a lot of the robot, I think.
And so now they're calling, now they're claiming, they're Team USA, and they've raised $200,000 already.
Asking for $500,000.
Asking for $500,000 to build out the robot. Good luck, guys.
I wouldn't
Make
want to
it-
be in the robot that's punching another robot.
I think it's going to be much safer than that.
I thought-
it's going to be much less thrilling than I think. These are not, it's not, I think BattleBot's still cooler.
BattleBots is owned by Whale Rock Industries, Tested.com's parent
Sure.
company.
Yes.
Phantom 3 Standard. What is this now?
Last week, we made a mistake talking about the Phantom models. I think, Jeremy, you asked how many Phantom 3 models there were, and I said there was the professional and the advanced version.
Yeah.
Difference only being that 1080p versus
4K.
4K camera. But while I was out, DJI announced a third Phantom 3 model, which is the Phantom 3 Standard. $200 cheaper than the advanced, so I believe it's only $800. But it loses connection to the GLONASS satellite system. It loses Lightbridge
Hold
for
on.
the video.
Phantom uses the Russian GPS.
It
The Phantom
uses
3 does?
both Russian and U.S.
To get better precision?
Get better precision
Nice.
outdoors. It loses the downward optical camera for indoor flying.
Yeah.
And the camera, the processor only can encode at 2.7K, which I think is fine. Some of the Phantom 3 Advanced people are kind of pissed off because the Advanced, which costs more, can only do 1080p, while this cheaper standard model now can do a 2.7K. So there is no great. I mean, they're calling it a great entry point for people to fly, but $800 is still a lot of money, and you lose a lot of features.
So what are the 3 tiers now? Standard,
Advanced, and Pro.
okay, and what Pro is better than Advanced?
Pro is better than Advanced.
Okay.
Pro is the only one that has the 4K.
All right.
I think that's it for news this week. Anything else we've forgotten? Want to take a minute and talk about what we've been testing?
Sure thing.
Jeremy, I heard you wanted more of those little interstitials.
Not not after the interstitial.
Oh, you don't want
Throughout
I can
throughout
give
the
you
show.
more.
You know, between news segments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad you really did listen to the podcast.
I did. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I've been using Windows 10 now for 2 weeks minus a week that I was gone. It's really good.
I can't wait. I just wish Oculus would support it, and I'll be in.
Yeah, the Oculus support's a bummer. The Samba problems, I had a lot of Samba problems that were solved by turning on allow anonymous login, allow anonymous connections on my FreeNAS box.
Oh.
And that fixed all of the problems that I had logging into the Samba shares.
Cool.
The overall it's really, really good. I'm a little bit concerned about the amount of data that gets sent back to Microsoft just in general. And I'm starting I now have probably 6 things in my house that listen for audio all the time. I'm starting to get a little creeped out by that.
Embrace it.
I know. Norm, you've been testing the OnePlus 2.
Just got the OnePlus 2 in yesterday. This is the company OnePlus One's second phone, which is, I believe, a $330 quote-unquote flagship phone. Off contract, 2 SIM cards. It's a fine phone so far. 1080p screen, a very fast processor, uses USB Type-C.
Oh, let me see. First time I think I've seen
Yes. But doesn't have raw camera recording, NFC, or fast charging on the battery. It's a little heavy.
It doesn't have fast charging on the battery?
That's interesting.
Does not have fast charging.
So
or
you have to
wireless
charge it
charging.
overnight?
Well, you have to charge it, 2
There's
hours.
Why do they not give you a brick that does, okay.
Fast charging
Crazy.
means you can charge it, 80% like 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you like the camera?
Haven't done extensive testing yet, but it doesn't do RAW, and I need to get a third-party camera app on that because I don't like the built-in camera app.
Oh.
It does have a fingerprint sensor.
Yeah, we swipe down here. What do you do?
No, you just hold your finger, but
Yeah.
you don't. Your fingerprint isn't there yet.
Right on.
Jeremy, you and I have been playing a lot of Rocket League.
Yep, I mentioned it last week, and I couldn't get anyone else on board.
Did you tell him? Should we just describe what Rocket League is?
Rocket League is soccer with cars.
Rocket-powered cars.
Yeah.
Supersonic, acrobatic, rocket-powered cars.
Cars that can do flips, frontward flips, barrel roll flips, ride on walls for indefinitely. It's
Rad.
It's gameplay and trumps physics.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's fun, not physics. It is a delightful game. It's out on PC and PS4. I think it's $20. We always play multiplayer. We usually play 2 or 3 versus 3, depending on how many people we have on every night. And the matchmaking is really fast. The games are like 3 to 5 minutes, depending on which mode you're in. It seems like.
I think they're all 5 minutes.
Are they all 5 minutes now?
Yeah, but the timer stops after you score and there's a replay, so takes maybe 6 minutes to finish a game.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it seems like the skill ceiling is kind of insane.
Yeah, when you first start playing the game, you think this isn't really a skill game. It's just kind of a fun driving, and you might hit the ball in the goal game.
Yeah.
But the more you play it, you realize that there's an immense amount of finesse required to do some of these moves and to line up your shot. I think the game has no right to be as interesting and skillful as it is. It just there's a bit of a learning curve involved.
Well, the interesting thing about the way the mechanics of shooting and hitting the ball and stuff works, like you can just drive down as if you were driving a real car and had a giant ball. You could just kind of bump the ball down the field. But you can also use the rocket boost and then the acrobatics to kind of put English on it and make it go in directions that the car is not actually going and stuff like that. It's super good.
The real advanced players, and I don't do this, and I've been playing for weeks now, but the real advanced players, they fly. They'll jump, aim upwards, and then hit their boost, and you only have about 5 seconds of boost, even if you're maxed out. But they'll use that just enough to arc their car up into the air and hit the ball, when it's flying through the air towards their goal, and it's amazing. It's a lot of fun. It's also very infuriating because you can have a really close game, end up losing, and just feel horrible, and then you're just out of it for the rest of the day. So sometimes I don't enjoy playing this game, to be honest with you. It's gotten the best of me more than once.
That's the mark of all good multiplayer games, though. I remember many nights in the depths of our TF2 obsession saying, I'm never playing this goddamn game again, and then putting the computer down. And
I have nearly broken my Xbox controller playing this game.
Really?
Like in two.
You play with an Xbox 360 controller?
Yeah.
Old school.
What do you play with?
Xbone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an Xbone.
You don't have an Xbone controller?
I don't have anything.
Get an Xbone. I like the PS4 DualShock, but it's a pain in the ass. It's a really good game. More people should be playing it, and there are a lot of people playing it right now.
I am addicted to it. I'll get up in the morning and play it. I'll play it last thing before I go to bed. It's horrible.
Wow, dark.
Sounds like college.
It's not Battlefield 1942, Norm. Do you guys want to, Jeremy? Anything you've been testing? You want to talk about?
Do you want to talk about Google Solar,
Oh,
It's Project Sunroof.
Project Sunroof?
is that what it's called? Yeah. I don't know. It's
Did you sign up for it?
It's not.
Well, what is the upside for Google? Because it seems to me that they are basically helping out the solar industry
Yeah.
by showing you a map of your roof, and this only works in like 2 cities.
It doesn't
right
work
now.
in Pacifica.
It works in San Francisco. It works in Seattle, I want to say.
Fresno, Central
Fresno.
Valley. So Central California. This is a 20% project.
Is that what it is?
It is.
They show an image of your roof, and they basically show you how much shade you get throughout the day. And then they recommend how many solar panels you would need. And then they give you a list of numbers to call to get solar panels
And they tell you how much
installed.
money you'll save.
Right, they tell you that, and they tell you how much you save over the 1 year and then 10 years, and how much it'll cost.
It's an interesting implementation of their Google Earth survey stuff. So what they're doing is taking data from Google Earth and using some of the mapping technologies they've built in to estimate when you type in your home address how much of that roof space you have, including at angles and stuff like that. And so they have some mapping information that they're playing with. But you're right; it really is just a funnel into getting you to think about solar.
But they don't sell solar.
They
Why are they doing this? Is this a goodness out of their heart kind of thing?
maybe it's don't be evil thing.
Right on.
I mean, Google has a long history of showing interesting applications of the data that they collect, right? So I'm not super surprised that they would do this. And maybe there's a referral program for the people who buy panels through them. Maybe they get 3% on all
I don't think
They get
in it to make-
$1.25?
They don't in it to make the solar program money.
I'm just saying it's possible. Should we take a couple questions?
Yes.
Emails?
Well, but we do the other one.
Email.
'Cause it's, we don't do emails. We do
Emails?
No.
Questions?
Boom.
If you have a question for This Is Only Test, the email address is podcast@tested.com. We love to get questions, so please send them in. Our first question comes from Todd. Todd says, Hey, Will, Norman, Jeremy. I have a computer connected to my TV with an AMD HD 6950 that I use to play games. It is not my primary machine, but I want to upgrade to Windows 10. However, the 6950 didn't make the cutoff for driver support on Windows 10 from what I've read so far. Do you have any suggestions how I could avoid a video card upgrade and still play games in Windows 10? The hardware is fine, so I'd hate for drivers to be my limiting factor. One idea I had was installing a Windows 7 into a virtual machine after upgrading to Windows 10, then installing Windows 7 video card drivers inside that virtual machine. But I don't have a lot of experience with virtual machines to have a feel for how that will work with drivers. What do you think? I'd appreciate any thoughts you have on this or any better solutions. Norman Chan, don't upgrade to Windows 10 if your video card drivers do not support it.
That's correct.
That is the super pro tip. Now, that said, HD 6000 is listed on the Windows 10 support list. So HD 6000 is, let me check.
Listen to that.
HD 6950.
That's great. Oh,
Yes.
That-
Theoretically, that should work.
that's good news.
But I would go read very carefully. It's not listed in the drop-down. HD series. There we go. Please select a value. HD 60XX PCIe. Windows 10 64-bit. Display results. Yeah, you have drivers. It says you have drivers. Supported products. HD R7 HD 6000. Yeah, you should. It looks like you have drivers, but read the fine print on AMD's download page. Next question is from, here we go, Don. Don says, I'm looking to do some projects that require a lot of sanding, but live in a New York City apartment without access to a yard or garage. Do you have any suggestions for dust management in small enclosed spaces? Also, do you have suggestions for a small reciprocating saw like the one Norman Frank used to cut their vacuum-formed Shadow Stormtrooper pieces that isn't driven by compressed air? All of the electrical ones seem to be much too big for small work. Thanks, and always be testing. If you have to do a lot of sanding and live in a small New York City apartment and have anybody else living in there, don't sand in the space. You'll make an unbelievable mess, even if you have a capture system. It's always, especially if you're doing like fine plastic and stuff like that, the dust gets everywhere. The biggest fight I've had with my wife in the last 5 or 10 years was when I sanded in our garage a couple of winters ago when I was sanding primer, and I put a fine layer of white powder over the entire garage, all the contents of it, that I then spent about 6 weeks, an hour or two a day at night vacuuming and dusting. You can kind of put a shop vac right next to it, but then that means that you have no extra hands, and also shop vacs are really loud. So anything you're going to do is going to be too loud. The thing I would say is that you might be able to sublet some studio space from somebody in a warehouse or something, depending on where you are, or find a maker space that'll be okay with it, that has a sanding area or something like that.
I don't have a workspace right now. I go out to the sidewalk when I need to sand something.
Yeah, I can't. I don't feel bad doing that in didn't feel bad doing that in San Francisco, where we have where it's not like apartment buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if you did that someplace where there's like a doorman, you'd probably get yelled at. You'd have to go in the alley out back.
Okay.
He also asked about small reciprocal saws. Do you know of anything?
I don't
Norm?
know anything that's electrical power. I'll ask Frank next time I see him.
Yeah, I know that you used to be able to get hobby saws, like at hobby shops, like the kind of stuff you would use to make a train set, or cut plastic for a train or something like that. That would be electrical, like a small electrical jigsaw or a small electrical reciprocal saw. But I don't know who makes them.
Check Dremel's website.
Russ wants to know about HTC Vive. I'm planning on getting the HTC Vive when it's released, and I will need a new computer to run it. It will mostly live in my living room, so it needs a small profile. I'd also like a secondary HDMI output that I can hook up to my projector so other people in the room can see what the Vive user sees. I assume the video card will be the limiting factor for that. What kind of specs should I be looking at to get the most out of Vive? First off, I don't think anybody knows whether you'll be able to mirror that display. Typically, you can't. Like with Oculus DK2 even, it's hard to mirror the display and get the full frame rate, because most of the displays, if you're going to mirror something, it has to match frame rate, or else there's to be like 3.2 pull down interpolation and all that crazy stuff. If you mirror it, you're going to get a lower frame rate on the glasses, which you don't want. So that'll depend. Whether you'll be able to see it depends on how the Vive works. I don't know how it works compared to the Oculus at all.
Throw as many graphics cards as you can at this.
Or I still think one big is better.
Yes, throw as much graphical power as
Yeah.
you can on this.
I would assume that the min spec that Oculus has announced, the 970 or 980,
970.
yeah, is the minimum you'd want to put in. So you're looking at a small form factor that has a discrete graphics card slot. You're not going to be able to run this on integrated. So yeah, there we go. Let's see if we have one more. Here we go. A wants to know, there's an app called ChronoSnap which shoots an image on a custom interval of your choice. This is the answer to questions about things you can do with old phones that we had a few weeks ago. It shoots an image on a custom interval of your choice between 1 second and 24 hours. The images can constantly go to Google Photos or Dropbox Backup, best to make a dedicated account to avoid cluttering up your main account. The images might not show exactly real-time footage due to varying latencies in the process. However, an optional secondary SIM card to your carrier plan to allow it to continue uploading if the local network dies. So you could use it as a security cam or something like that. But ChronoSnap sounds like an interesting app. And I think that's it for us. Jeremy Williams, where can people find you?
At Jareware on Twitter.
At Jareware, Norman Chan.
And Chan,
What's going on the site?
we have a talking room going up already up today, so you'll be sure to check that out. And it's with
Mary
Mary Roach.
I love that series.
And
Jeremy.
we'll have one more episode of that in the coming weeks. And then tomorrow we also have that real virtuality video, that demo that we talked about earlier in this podcast, and then more Rancor building this weekend.
Cool. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. This is Only a Test, and today's outro comes from somebody whose name I didn't write down, so I apologize in advance. Hi there, I didn't see you.
Tested.
I don't want anything to do with that stuff. I'm farty enough naturally.
Tested.
That is true. It's from B77W.
And we used that last week too.
Oh, well, that works out.
Thanks, B77W.
Bye, guys.
See ya.